Star extended the invitation in 2019. I went back and looked, and it was extended then. So it's just really good to be here reading with Natalie. And Natalie, that was so beautiful. I can't wait to read the rest of it someday. So I want to start tonight just by saying that I've been thinking a lot recently about beginnings. And specifically, I've been thinking a lot about how we as writers begin something, because I think this has been on my mind in part because I'm finding this a really difficult time to begin new work. And so probably as a way to soothe myself or convince myself that I'll be able to do it again, I've been going back to my previous short stories to try to figure out, like, how did this begin? Where did I start, right? And so I thought before I shared part of a story with you tonight that I might tell you my kind of the origin story of this piece. And I think I can identify two beginnings to this story. And the first beginning was in 2004. And it was when my then boyfriend and now husband visited my hometown for the first time. And there's something kind of amazing that happens when somebody new visits a place that you know really well. Because for me, I know that, like, I have all kinds of associations with my hometown. I have all these memories that are, you know, kind of attached to that hometown. And when someone new comes with me to that place, I can kind of see it fresh again. And I always appreciate just kind of watching to see, like, what is it that they notice, right? And so I grew up in this tiny town in northern Vermont, really close to the Canadian border and New Hampshire border. And it's kind of tucked away in this little corner. There's about 6,000 people who live there. And so I bring my then boyfriend into town, and the downtown is like one block. That's it. That's all you get. It's one block of stores. About half of them are boarded up. And then there's like a hardware store, and there's a hunting store, and there's a diner, and there's McDonald's. And he's not impressed by any of this, of course, right? But the thing that he makes me stop the car for is this tiny little shop in the downtown square. And it's got a sign over it, and the sign says bookstore. But then right under the bookstore sign, there's another sign, and that sign says headquarter for the American Society of Dowsers. And I don't know if any of you know what a dowser is, but dowsers are people who search for water, and they use like rods often, like that they hold in their hands, and sometimes they use pendulums to search for it, right? So he's like, what? This is the headquarter for the American Society of Dowsers. And it wasn't that I had never noticed, you know, kind of that bookstore and that plaque, but I guess I just assumed that, like, all small towns in New England have, you know, a bookstore that doubles as a dowsing meeting place, but apparently not. And so that was in 2004. And so that just like goes into the back of my mind, right? Like, I'm not thinking about doing anything with it. I'm just like filing it in the back of my mind as like, oh, that's something that's interesting, right? Like his reaction to that is interesting. Oh, I'm so glad Russ just posted something about, oh, we have so much to talk about, Russ. And so so that's like the first beginning, right? That's my first beginning of this story. The second beginning of this story for me comes 11 years later, when I'm like deep down some rabbit hole of procrastination. I'm sure I'm supposed to be writing. I probably have a deadline, or I'm supposed to be grading papers. And I come across this article about a town that is out of water. Okay. And there's a woman in the town who is a dowser, and she's going to find the town water. Okay. And this is an article, I think it was published in the American Scholar. I think that's where I read it. And so when I read this article, like I could almost feel like that file in my brain opening from that event in 2004. And so I all of a sudden just felt this kind of like energy, right? Where I started to just do a lot of reading, and I would look back on that time now and say it was research, but in the moment I wasn't thinking I'm going to go research this. I was just kind of moving towards the thing that interests me. So the things I started to kind of get interested in were like water rights, right? Like droughts, what happens to communities that run out of water, right? And I was also interested in dowsing, because I was like, what is it? How does it work? What are these tools that they use? And so I took a ton of notes, I read a bunch of stuff, and I wrote a really crappy first draft of a story, and finished it probably in about 2015, and revised it, revised it, revised it, and at some point I thought, I think this could be a novel. And so I wrote 100 pages of that novel. I was like, I think the spine is strong enough. I think I've got enough here. I wrote 100 pages of it and I realized I was wrong. Like, this is not a novel. And so then I cut down those 100 pages to 20 pages into the current form that this story is now in. And so um, I thought I would just read maybe the first, I don't know, 7 or 8 pages for you all tonight, so you can just get kind of a taste of what this story is and what it reads like now. The only thing you need to know about it kind of structurally is that it's told in kind of vignettes, so really short scenes. And I'll pause after each scene because there's some white space there. So just kind of imagine there's a break in the text. Okay, so this is called Call Up the Waters. Here's what our mother told us that summer. Beneath our feet was a world of water. Tunnels and tubes 10 feet down, 30 feet down, some even further, all bending and merging into rivers and streams. This was the summer of her dowsing rods and pendulums, of earth tides and underlands. The summer she twisted wire coat hangers to look like tuning forks and walked up and down the driveway talking to the ground. She could find it, she told us. She could find the water. We weren't the only people she told. She told Joy Cooper too, who told her husband Dave. And once Dave knew, Amy Marcus knew. And then Amy told Daniel Rush, who told Mona Towers, who told Lydia Nova. And once Lydia knew, the entire town knew. And for the rest of that summer, people took a great interest in our mother. Even in ripped jeans and a dirty t-shirt, her hair knotted on top of her head, held in place by a pencil she'd found between the couch cushions, our mother was the most beautiful woman in town, no matter what town we were in. I have an early memory of her, one I can't place in time, but I see her there, standing at the kitchen stove in our Colorado home, boiling water until it was safe to drink, storing it in glass jars in cupboards above the sink. Now that she's gone, I think about her every time I see one of those glass jars, the kind people use for canning peaches or chutney or jam. One morning, sometime that summer, my brother Jack put a piece of paper in front of me. He lined up his crayons, which he'd just sharpened, and he told me to draw the underground rivers, not from the perspective of a human, but from the perspective of an ant. He thought it would help him understand. I was 11 and Jack was 8, and while I imagined a ladder into the world under our feet, Jack imagined a set of stairs. When our mother came into the kitchen, her eyes heavy with sleep, her skin pink the way it always was when she woke, she stood behind me, pulling her fingers through my long, thin hair, whispering in her morning voice, "No, no, no, you've got it all wrong." We waited for her to pick up a crayon and draw it right, but she only sat down at the end of the table, and Jack and I scrambled for the seat closest to her. Mary Beth Gates, famous in town for running the same 3-mile loop every morning for 25 years, suddenly switched her route, finishing her run in a little park across from our house. Jack and I saw her one morning at dawn, stretching her legs for a long time before she finally walked up the stairs and onto our porch. "Is it true?" she asked. "Can you find us water?" "Come in, Mary Beth," my mother said. The 4 of us sat down at the kitchen table, the women with their coffee, my brother and me with our orange juice and cereal. We listened as our mother described the world below. Caves, sinkholes, buried waterfalls, a raging river that carved tunnels through rocks. Our mother unfolded a map. "It's here," she said. We all leaned in and she dragged her finger across the dark green mountains to the west of our town. All kinds of water in here. For 2 months that summer, local farmers siphoned water from the reservoir 3 hours east until they were caught and fined. People stood in line at the fire station waiting for flats of bottled water, sometimes for hours. They carried empty jugs in their cars in case they were lucky enough to find a spring, and set up buckets to collect rainwater, anticipating the late summer monsoons. When the rain never arrived, the Ingrams packed up and moved to Virginia. The Hazel Groves went to Seattle. Gordon Giles went to live with his son in New Mexico, and 8 families on West Ridge Road left together in a train of minivans. Long before all of this, our mother spent her days in flower beds, tugging weeds with both hands and killing aphids between her fingers. She foraged for mushrooms in the forest behind our house and sold them to our neighbors from the front porch. In our small plot of land, she dug in the soil, pulling out shards of pottery and fish fossils, and picking edible plants that she ate without washing. The knees of her pants were mud-stained and threadbare, and she could never get her fingernails clean. While everyone else in town checked weather reports each hour and mumbled prayers for rain on Sundays, our mother kept her head down, certain the answer to everything was always in the ground. A week after Mary Beth visited, our mother told us to get in the car. She pulled on our seatbelts and she drove us into the canyon, where we climbed high enough and long enough for the radio to cut out and the air to cool. And I thought maybe this time she'd drive us out of Colorado and into Utah like she sometimes promised. Before we reached the state line, the car slowed and we bumped our way onto the gravel road, wheels throwing tiny pebbles against the underside of the car. I felt the weight of Jack's body against mine, his head on my shoulder, his leg bouncing. I put my hand on his knee and he stopped. All around us was dust and boulders, cliffs and caves, a dry stream, a dead tree. It hadn't rained in months. She parked on the side of the road and we followed her through the forest to a large gash in the side of the mountain. We walked as far as we could with the light from the opening guiding us, and then our mother turned on their flashlight and led us deeper into the darkness until finally she stopped, bent down, and pushed away the dirt with her fingers. Jack and I crouched next to her. Here, she said, and we each put a hand on the ground. It was wet. We dug deeper. We reached mud. Earth tides, she told us. She did this. She'd pick up a hobby, busy herself with it for a few months, and before long, it would become an afterthought, an unfinished project that joined all the other unfinished projects. A partial quilt, a half-knit hat, a birdhouse without a roof, rolls and rolls of photographs never developed. Given time, she'd grow bored of this too, and I knew her dowsing rods would end up in the basket with the knitting needles under the sewing machine that she never used. With all of our mother's talk about rivers under our feet, of waterfalls careening into a deep darkness below us, of water rising spontaneously through the hard, hard ground, is it any surprise that Jack was suddenly afraid to leave the house? That he wouldn't step off the front porch without holding my hand because he thought the land might buckle, that the earth might swallow him up, that he'd sink chest deep into an underground river without a life jacket. One day I found her in the bed of a dry creek and I followed her across the land. Her elbows were pinned at her sides, her L-rods out in front of her, searching for hidden water veins. What does it feel like, I asked her, when you find the water? Is it a pull, a twitch? She shook her head. She looked disappointed. Of course not, she said. Annoyed, she waved me away, and then she lowered herself to the ground, dropping to hands and knees and then her belly, listening for the world beneath the surface. While Jack was busy worrying about the ground giving out, the underground rivers pulling him down, my own fears were different. I worried she'd call up the waters and they wouldn't stop. They'd keep rising, and we'd be left with a waterlogged home, a drowned cemetery, a rusted skeleton of a car, a church with bells that chimed when the waters were rough. I imagined canoeing over land we'd once used as a garden, fishing in water that had once been our front lawn. In every other way, she was like all of the other mothers we knew. She brushed my hair too hard and too fast. She sent Jack back to the bathroom when she sensed he hadn't flossed. She worried about rising gasoline prices and rising electricity costs, turning the heat low in the winter, and flipping off the lights we'd left on in the rooms we were no longer in. She read the newspaper, picked up litter on the sidewalk, insisted we take off our shoes when we entered the house. Except a year earlier, before she became a dowser, I found her at the edge of town, her arms wrapped around a maple, her forehead resting against the trunk. I went to her, certain to drag my feet through the leaves as I approached, so I didn't startle her. I rested my hand on her back and she turned to look at me. It chases away bad thoughts, she said, smiling. We were quiet for a long time, the two of us standing there, my shoes getting lost in the fallen leaves, my mother still holding the trunk. It gives me energy, she said. Life force, you might call it. I've noticed it happens with white pines too, less so with oaks. Can we go home now? I asked. She took my hand and we walked toward the house, everything quiet except the leaves under our feet. I mocked her, just once, but I still mocked her. I was waiting for my friends so we could all climb the fire lookout tower at the top of the hill and throw rocks from the platform. When they finally came around the corner, I saw the twigs in their hands, their elbows at their sides. They held the sticks just like my mother held her dowsing rods, and they laughed as Owen Carlyle pretended to be dragged this way and that by some invisible force in the ground. When he saw me, he stopped and waited for me to say or do something, and so I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up sticks of my own and ran toward them chanting, in a voice that sounded nothing like my mother, water, water, everywhere. They laughed and laughed. Sometimes when she left us all day and all night, we called her the names we heard Daniel Rush call her. Water witch, kook. Always when she returned, she whispered in our ears, my little darlings, my lovely children, my sweet little geese. She'd help us up from the couch one at a time and lead us to the bed where she'd pull the covers over our shoulders. I loved that feeling of her warm lips against my forehead, her cold hands on my cheek, the smell of soil and grass and rocks, and yes, if I breathed in deep enough, it seemed I could smell fresh water. There, between sleep and awake, I believed her. I thought it was possible that she might find the water with her sticks. Okay, I'll end there. Thank you. Thanks for having us, you guys.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Yeah, that was amazing. That was so captivating. I especially like the snide remark about oaks. You know, they don't have as much life force as the white pine. Dang oaks. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both again for being flexible and willing to like read to your computer screens. I know we're all spending so much time on our computer screens, but you did amazing. Amazing. Let's give one more. It's almost like a fleshy snowfall, isn't it? All these silent hands falling. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you both so much. A lot of mother and grandmother, a lot of maternal lines going on tonight. That's so interesting. I know Dowsing Rod because I have a 16-year-old brother who like ghost hunts with him. Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, we will shimmy on into our open mic portion. This is everyone's time. If you have questions or comments for the readers, I'm sure you could shoot them their way in the chat function, or hang out and talk to them after we get through with our open micers, and we're just having a great time. My coffee's coming in. It's great. Perfect. Okay, so as a reminder for our participants, you will have 7 minutes each, and then I don't know, just regular Zoom etiquette. Please don't take off your clothes. Things like that. Okay. I'm like a little terrified there's going to be a Zoom bomber someday because I'm like, oh, I just put the password on Facebook. But so far, so good. So, Philip, you are first in line. You can go ahead and unmute.
Great. Thank you. So excited to be here, have a chance to read. I wanted to read 3 poems. 2 are ones that recently, one has recently been published, one will be published soon. And then another is just a new one. I'm actually going to just start with the newer one first. This one was a poem that I had an idea for a while ago, but then sort of felt it's about the Day of the Dead, or that's part of the image that inspired it. So around October last year was when I sort of worked on this one. So this one is called Dia de los Muertos. Memory, the place we lay our loves to rest. Today, the grave is lined with marigolds, each remembered kiss a fistful of fire. My first true boyfriend appears in photos of a parade through Torreon. It's night where he lives. He glows under festival lights, more handsome somehow than before. I trace the bones of who we were, spine, skull, sockets like windows round the private darkness where we could touch, movie theaters, my bedroom, a car in the canyon. See, I'm no stranger to haunting. He smiles for the camera, not me, living his own life in which I'm a ghost. Tonight, the photo makes a threshold I cross over the way the dead do, from an afterlife to one before, where I take his hand and we lie down beside a river, his chest on mine, hearts stacked. Each breath presses ribs together, presses earth and dusk together into a horizon of desire. We listen. Blood rushes through us as our eyes close like flowers in the dark. Thank you. This second poem is one that I wrote because there was a themed issue of a journal, and I thought, why not? It was a Dolly Parton themed journal, and I didn't have any Dolly Parton poems, but I thought I would write one. And I had come across this YouTube recording, some of you might know it, of Dolly Parton's Jolene, but it's slowed down. The vinyl is played at a slower rate. And so the song is slower, but it also changes the pitch. And I thought it was captivating. So that's what inspired this poem. If you play Jolene at 33 RPM, Dolly's vocals lower to a cowboy croon. I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Slow any song and sorrow blooms like blood through a bandage. Slow sorrow and it darkens like dusk stained windows. Outside, moths fire dance around a porch light. A black horse breathes in a field, lungs filling with night. The words curve into prayer. Please don't take him, even though you can. Jolene as Jesus, green-eyed with fiery hair, the God gay men at bedsides begged to spare their loves. Imagine the quiet when she didn't answer. Sound of the stylus lifted, the record still turning. And this last one is a little more upbeat. And this was kind of a fun one. It was some poems surprise you, and I didn't know where this was really going. And then in classic fashion, when it ended up where it was going to go, it was related to a lot of the topics that I'm writing about. But I'm not sure when this one will come out. I think sometime in the summer. It's called Meditation on a Gumball Machine. Circus of circles, rainbow dispenser, paint swatch jukebox, a whole birthday in a snow globe. The cosmos packed with bright planets, stars more shades than they explained in school. Green, orange, blue and violet giants next to red and yellow suns. The nucleus of one massive atom, or one boy's head hoarding grenades. Have you ever felt so sick of secrets you'd spend every nickel to be emptied? A glass moon with nothing to hide. People think grief only comes in blue, but what about the hot pink losses, the white regrets glowing in the dark? Maybe the blue are really sky, souvenirs from an afternoon you walked home to yourself, sugar on your tongue, every cell inside you shiny and solid. Listen, the love you tasted that day is worthy. Whatever sweetness your parents said you couldn't have, you can have. Thank you, everybody. So glad to share.
Thank you so much, Philip. I got goosebumps back there in Jolene somewhere, and I was like, ooh, I love that gumball. That was brilliant. Thank you, thank you. Okay, next up we have Vin McBride. Vin, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hello, everyone. So I just got the two. The one is longer, the one is shorter. So the first is Wine Dark Sunshine, Variations on a Familiar Theme, Poco a Poco. 1. Icarus calls me from a payphone, rambling somewhere between Calgary and El Paso. He was flying and suddenly falling, and would it be an inconvenience if, perhaps, money could be wired to him? Andromeda, he sings, always singing, be a dear, cousin mine. I wonder sometimes if he clipped his own wings, or 1,001 other hands reached out, plucked feathers to keep for themselves. 2. Does he miss me? He calls to ask about you. I can't say otherwise. Boo, I hope he misses me. It's nice. What's nice? Being missed. You should come home. I should. 3. He doesn't. 4. I met Apollo just the once. A tall man, expensive suit, more expensive shoes, a tie the color of melting gold. He moved like a cat on the hunt, moved like thinner through paint, moved like the stars in orbit, slipped around Icarus like an oil spill, eyes fixed and wondering. They left early. I can see them in the doorway, Apollo pulling Icarus in, draping a coat on his shoulders. He was so thin then, sliding on his own, turning in the half-light of the porch, heads bent together, privately conspiratorial. 5. He left Apollo in search of the sun, found me on Saturnalia, whispered his hopes into fire-blazed night, and was gone again in the next afternoon. No more Apollo to see in the night or the morning, no more drinking hope and despair in equal measure, no. Icarus makes new wings, flies up at the sun again and again, unfeeling soul burning him up. Apollo calls me, clockwork regular, solstice and equinox, and asks about him anyway. I send him the feathers from those wings in the mail. 6. Icarus calls me from Missouri prisons, from impossible payphones out in the desert, from cell phones at parties in Upper Manhattan, from Hollywood backlots and Tennessee moonshine operations, from Appalachia and orange-heavy Florida, flying and falling in rhythm with the sun. There's a familiar way to his failures and triumphs, and I smile when he calls me, sings out, Andromeda, Andromeda. The both of us tethered, me to my mountain crags, him to chasing the light, touching the horizon. 7. I send him $50. He never comes home. And second, Lyra. A difficult name for a difficult time, but for all that you were born easy and kind on your mama, Astur Motroi, they gave your name to high kings, little child. Calf herder it means, same as your ma and da, same as your line. They'll tell you the stories until they're your stories too, until you have a heart for the ride in the open plains. Astorine, treasure beyond count. Let that difficult name be proud in your mouth.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Vin. Wow, like that opener, Icarus calls me from a payphone. Oh, hooked. And then when you said moved like thinner through paint, like my body just like rocked. You had there, that was a glittery work of art. Thank you so much for reading that for us. That was awesome. Sean, my dear Sean, you are up next.
Thanks, Britt. And one of the things that I feel like is saddest about online is we can't hear each other go, whenever something is like phenomenal. So just know that I've been making that noise in my office all night long. Just mm. Anyway, I will be reading a short essay that takes the form of the Craigslist missed connections. So here we go. Craigslist, Utah, Logan Community Missed Connections, August 20th, 2010, Alex, Meadowview Apartments. You moved out before I told you that I love you. I spent all summer falling asleep to the sound of your voice, telling stories from the bed across the room. You told me story after story, and I wondered if you had ever told anyone these stories before. I realized that I loved you the night you told me about the day that a stray dog followed you home from work. You convinced your parents to let you keep her. I've never envied a dog so much. Maybe in 2 years, when you're done being a Mormon missionary, we can move in together again, and I can sleep feet away from you. I think I could be happy for the rest of my life if I could spend every night with you sleeping feet away from me. September 14th, 2010. Mismatched Converse guy, Paul Crumbly's English 2600. We never talked in class. That's my bad. With your straight hair that stands up just right, like all the cool kids in my high school, if you ever want to study together, and by study I mean make out, message me. Tell me what color Converse you wore so I know it's you. Craigslist, California, Carlsbad, Community, Missed Connections. April 6th, 2013. Dark-haired, shirtless man, San Remo Park. I was one of the 2 Mormon missionaries who approached you in San Remo Park. I had been a missionary for a year, so I knew how to talk to strangers, but I froze when he pulled up on our bikes. I thought I had crushed my attractions to men, but I haven't stopped thinking about you since I saw you. You said you weren't interested in us teaching you about our faith, but I am interested in you teaching me how to sin. Craigslist, Utah, Logan, Community Missed Connections, February 3rd, 2014, Alex, night janitor at the Taggart Student Center. We got home from our California spring break trip on Sunday, and I haven't seen you since, which feels intentional since your bedroom is down the hall from mine. I thought we'd be inseparable when we got home from our missions, and we were until we went to California, just the 2 of us. I wanted to show you all of the places that I had lived while I was a missionary. I think I might have been too forward. On our drive home, I told you I loved you in the language you spoke on your mission, Mahal Kita. You got quiet and turned away. I shouldn't have said it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. October 14th, 2014. French exchange student, the Creperie. When you brought my crepe, you told me you had added some extra fillings free of charge because you thought I would like them. Then you blushed and hurried away. I should have kissed you on the mouth. I should have at least asked you for your number. I'm sorry. I'm still learning how to be gay. I recently got home from a Mormon mission and I've never been on a real date with a man. I'm ready to ask you out now. Message me what you added to my crepe so I know it's you. October 12th, 2015, Alex, Old Farm Apartments. You sent a text after you moved out. I thought it meant you wanted to start a conversation. I didn't realize that you only wanted the last word, that you'd never open my response. You told me that you had made promises to God to defend the traditional family. You told me you found a nice girl to date who knew all about your baggage and who loved you anyway. I know all about you and I love you. I know you well enough to know you won't respond, not to my text, not here, and not to me. Craigslist, Utah, Brigham City, Community Missed Connections. October 12th, 2020, Alex, drove a blue Ford Taurus. God, how many times will I write about you? You married the nice girl you texted me about, the one who knows everything about you and who loves you anyway. You posted a picture with your son on Facebook. He's old enough to stand if he can hold onto your fingers. He has your blue eyes and your blonde hair. I'm glad he looks like you. You teach at my old middle school. You've made it. A wife, a son, a full-time job, doing what you love. And I keep writing about you. Did you know that you're a part of every essay I've published? I return and return to you. I had a dream last night that you showed up at one of my readings, where of course I read about you. I tried to tell you to go to hell, but you knew that everything I've ever written has been a love letter for you to find. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Star is giving you all the love in the chat. All the love that Alex couldn't, wouldn't, didn't. You got it. You got it here, baby. Okay. Millie Tullis, would you like to unmute?
Yes. Okay. It's nice to see so many familiar and new faces. Make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. My anxiety is that I'll start talking and think I'm unmuted and muted, and then I'm unmuted. But okay, so this is actually some fiction. I'll just read a couple pages. When Hope thought the hamster should be baptized, we dumped the craft supplies out of my mother's plastic bin and filled it with tinny water from the hose. We baptized them, my hamster and my older sisters, the same way we baptized each other in the pool, pretending to be our fathers. We were not yet old enough to be baptized ourselves. My sister's hamster was the smaller of the two, and when she was frightened enough, she simply froze in our hands, and that day her fear made it easy enough to maneuver her up and down in the water. She was still. It was as if she were caught in ice we couldn't see. Her face kept twitching, but her arms and legs almost buzzed with rigidness. Occasionally, though, she snapped the other way, so you had to feel her always for any sign of sudden movement. She would sink her teeth hard into your hand in order to run away. Hope said the prayer. Having been commissioned of Jesus, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, amen. Dunked her into the water and counted to 3. My hamster struggled harder when Hope held her above our baptismal font. She must be really full of sin. Look how scared she is of the water, Hope said. She needs to be baptized extra bad. She held my hamster underwater until she too was still. My father was going to baptize me when I turned 8, but it was unclear who was going to baptize Hope. Hope fed me serial updates about her father, who I only saw a few times from my house across the cul-de-sac. I was a little frightened by his shiny shaved head and his always wearing dark sunglasses. He looked nothing like my father, who kept his hair so short I never knew if it was straight or curly and wore round, wiry glasses. Hope's father had moved to Vegas when Hope was a baby and married a woman named Valentina who had her own children. He often sent her more than one birthday gift, but spaced out as if he wasn't sure he had already sent one or couldn't remember if her birthday was in late June or early July. He never visited on Sunday, and he never went to church. Most days, Hope wanted us to practice our drawing. Her mother's an artist, and we wanted to be artists too. We admired the corner of Hope's dining room that was devoted to her mother's landscapes. We were not allowed to touch anything there, but we carefully studied the white tubes of paint, the mason jars of drying brushes, the perpetually half-finished pieces of canyon and sky without getting too close. The stool she sat on while she painted had flecks of every color, and the thin, clear tarp covering the carpet crunched stiffly. Hope's mother was also a nurse and played in a bowling league with a handful of other divorced mothers in our congregation. When she was home from work, she often lay down on the couch with a cold, wet washcloth covering her eyes and we had to whisper our games. One summer, Hope's mother painted cats on the walls of Hope's room. They were all big cats with thin, curling tails and wide smiles. The cats took her several afternoons to finish. I didn't like her mother's cats as much as her mother's landscapes because they didn't look like real cats. But I was still jealous as my own room, which I had to share with one of my younger sisters, had never been painted. The walls were the same color as all the other walls in the house, except for one wall in the kitchen, which my mother had spent a long fall day painting blue before getting too tired to keep going with the rest. We sat at Hope's kitchen table drawing. We used her mother's colored Post-it notes. Post-its were good because they were a small surface. You could draw many pictures very quickly. We never said it was a race, but it was best to draw the nicest picture and be the fastest. Hope and I would take turns deciding what it was we would draw next: flowers, cats, dogs, girls. We would draw for only a minute or two and then compare. We usually played at Hope's house unless her mother sent her to mine. because there were no little sisters who wanted to join us in our drawing, and my mother could only ever find plain printer paper for us to use. You're so much better than I am, Hope would say, looking at our two cats on the two pink squares of paper. I silently agreed. My cats were closer to the right shape. Her cat's legs grew too skinny, their heads too small. She frequently messed up eyes, trying to make them too complicated, so they ended up uneven. If her mother was nearby when we were comparing our pictures, she would fervently disagree with Hope. This is wonderful, Hope. I love it. She would take Hope's Post-it and place it above the water dispenser on her new stainless steel fridge and never asked to see mine. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Millie. That line about she needs to be baptized extra bad. Millie knows I just finished reading Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye, and I was getting big ol' Margaret Atwood vibes. Thank you. Also, your glasses are so cute. Okay, Stephen Shumway, would you like to unmute for us next?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm gonna read a couple poems. Then I'm really nervous, so sorry if my voice is a little shaky. Okay, this first one is called Addicted. She is sharp as used needles. Grab her and get pricked, then sick, then high. She's a biohazard. She'll watch you die a long death with what she slipped in your veins through her long silver fingers. Was it blackberry heroin, sweeter than tar, that made you jump off that cliff, fly through the clouds just to hear her voice in your ears, just for one more hit of her? And then this other one is called At First Sight. You knew it would happen, standing before the precipice, hands shaking like hummingbirds. Head over heels, he would perpetually tumble, blood pumping to his face and to his brain, swelling his mouth and ballooning his tongue. He would gasp, snapping his eyes shut as he saw the pavement speeding towards him. Splat. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. She smiled and sent him plummeting down. That's it.
Yay. Thank you, Stephen. That was so visceral. You have so many good, just physical details in there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Elizabeth. I hope I said that right. You are next, my friend, if you'd like to unmute.
Hello. You pronounced it correctly enough. It's a weird name. I pronounce it Elizabeth. Other people pronounce it differently. It's all acceptable. Hello, I'm just gonna read 2 poems because I have no concept of time, but I figure 2 is gonna be less than 7 minutes. This first one is called Forgiveness. I will never be forgiven for the ways I have treated myself. Treated like a stranger, a villain, treated myself like perhaps I am less than the last stranger I passed on the street. Like their life must be better than mine, funnier, prettier, smarter. Maybe that person is someone who wakes up in the morning and does more than roll out of bed, drink coffee, and take 4 hours to get dressed. I've treated myself like a stranger and forgotten who I am. How are you supposed to treat someone you don't know? A stranger in the window of a coffee shop, a stranger in a passing car, a stranger walking on the street, a stranger in your bed every night. How do I not know myself when I take every breath inside my own head? A stranger in my bed, a stranger in my head. Treat that stranger like someone you love. I have treated her with indifference at best and loathing at worst. The stranger in my skin makes me tea on cold mornings. She cooks my dinner and tucks me in. She dries my tears and tells me that maybe things will get better in the morning. When things aren't, takes me to buy a milkshake or breakfast or maybe a shirt. The stranger in my skin screams with me in the night in a park up the canyon, and when the wind rises and falls and whips my hair into a frenzy, I breathe with her, and she breathes with me. And for a moment, I am forgiven. That is poem number 1. Thank you. The second poem I'm going to share tonight is a golden shovel poem. For those of you who don't know what that is, you take a quote or a line from like a song or poetry or something, and then each line of your poem ends with a word in order from that quote. So this is my first attempt at a golden shovel poem. They're a little wacky. Oh, my cat wants to sit in my lap. Hello. I feel awkward. Everything's fine. So the quote I took was, "For us, there is only the trying. The rest is not our business," by T.S. Eliot. I don't always know what I'm here for. I'm told there's something out there for all of us, but I'm not sure where to find this out there, where the something we all look for is. Sometimes I wonder if there is one thing only, or if we miss things along the way searching for that the. And I wonder if everyone knows I am trying, maybe not trying to find that the, maybe I am trying to find rest. Maybe I'm trying to stop and recognize the things other miss along the way, recognize something that simply is. I'm tired of trying to be something. I'm not trying to see things for what they are not. I think I want something that is not only my thing, but our, and it doesn't need to be anyone else's business. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Powerful reading voice. Like you came on, just chill cucumber, and then you started reading, and it was like, brr, 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 like in a great way. That I realize now, brr, 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 sounds aggressive.
No, I get
but
you.
It's a compliment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reading. Absolutely. Darren Bott, you are up next. If you'd like to unmute.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So what I wanted to share today is just a short story. It's a little bit more like a short scene that I wrote that's fantasy. So I'll just get into it. It says, "The traveler glanced over his shoulder at the last rays of the dying sun as they brushed the tops of the surrounding trees and continued to ascend. Frowning, he carefully hefted the bulky pack onto his shoulder and began to pick up his pace. At this rate, he might not make it out of the forest by nightfall, and he shuddered to think what that could mean, especially if the stories he had heard were true. Despite the deepening shadows and overgrown vegetation, he closely followed each curve and bend of the unfamiliar, well-worn trail. He had made journeys like this 1,000 times, but he still couldn't shake the growing uneasiness that continued to gnaw at the back of his mind. Gradually, the soft chirp of crickets was joined with a gentle lapping as the trees ahead thinned, stopping at the sparkling water of a tranquil lake. The clear blue of its lazy ripples intertwined with the oranges and reds of the setting sun. He was tempted to take off his shoes and rest his travel-worn feet in the cool water, but his eyes hurriedly scanned the opposite shoreline. The traveler sighed in relief. The faint torchlight in the distance revealed the gates of the city to remain open. There was still time. The only thing left was for him to cross the deep water, and he would be safe behind the city's stone walls, and for that he needed the ferry. Turning to the small dock, he faltered. The space where he was told that the wooden boat would be waiting in the water was empty. Panic began to build in his chest. He had arrived later than planned, but the faint rays of the sun could still be seen peeking above the horizon, and the city gates were open. The ferry should have been there, but it wasn't. "What are you doing out here?" came a gruff voice from behind him. The traveler jumped and whirled around, sliding out the knife he kept sheathed at his waist, but relaxed when he saw an older man at the edge of the tree line. "Are you the ferryman?" he asked. "I need a ride across before the city gates close." The stranger's eyes widened. The ferry, the last ferry left early on account of a blast from a horn cut through the cool air, and his heart sank. Slowly, he and the other man turned to look at the city as the lights in the distance were snuffed out. He was too late. The man cursed under his breath and began to head down the shoreline. "Come," he ordered, "we don't have much time." After only a moment's hesitation, as the traveler glanced back at the city, he turned and followed the stranger. In the growing darkness, he could make out the faint outline of a shack near the base of a large tree near the water's edge. Quickly, the man opened the door and ushered him inside. Once he had crossed the threshold, the door was slammed shut and several deadbolts were slid into place. The man sighed in relief. Glancing around, the traveler saw that the small room only had a single bed and a few rations on a makeshift table pushed to the side. The only source of light was a small window that looked out over the tranquil lake. The room looked like it hadn't been used for years. This was built a few years ago, the man explained, for the times that the ferryman and a fellow like yourself didn't make it to the dock by sundown. First time it's been used since I'm aware. I lost track of time, he whispered quietly, his eyes fixed on the ground. Doesn't matter now, the man retorted. What's done is, he paused, his eyes fixed on the window. What is it? Listen, the man whispered. The traveler stared out the window in silence, but there was nothing besides the gentle lapping of the water. I don't hear anything, he said. Exactly. He froze. The once constant chirp of crickets had given way to an eerie silence. Then an unearthly yowl tore through the night air, the sound cutting him to the core. It was followed by another, and then another. The man smiled. You ever seen a flicker up close? The traveler slowly shook his head. Well, today is your lucky day. He pointed to the window. The traveler looked through the glass, not fully sure what to expect on the other side, but the dim moonlight reflecting off the water only revealed the shadows of the trees. Suddenly, on the far end of the lake was a small flash of light that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Then another light flared to life, this one closer than the first, followed by another before plunging back into darkness. Don't look at the light show, the man murmured. Watch the edge of the water. Redirecting his gaze, the traveler looked back at the lake. There in the moonlight, a black cat approached the edge of the dock and began to pace back and forth. He cocked his head. The cat, he asked confused, is it yours? Are the flickers going to kill it? That's a flicker, the man said grimly. A flicker, the traveler snorted. Everyone knows that flickers are bloodthirsty beasts that hunt at night, using their light to confuse their prey. They're not house cats. Watch. The traveler paused, watching as the first cat paused, and then let in another screeching yell. Suddenly, its fur began to glow. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, sure it was a trick of the moonlight, but the cat continued to glow faintly. Soon it was joined by two other cats that also began to glow, their glossy pelts shimmering with light as they paced at the edge of the waterline. Fear began to grip his chest. But they're just cats, he whispered to himself. Cats can't hurt us. They're actually much larger than your average kitty and twice as mean, the man said, his voice low. They also seem pretty agitated tonight. We're lucky we're in here. Otherwise, they and their friends would rip us apart. Their friends? What do you mean? These three are just the first, the man explained, gesturing to the trees. Slowly, more lights began to appear as one glowing cat after another arrived at the edge of the lake until there were at least a dozen, with more still emerging from the shadows. Each of them paced at the water's edge, began sniffing the ground, and then let out their piercing cries. The man gave a low whistle. That's a lot of them. There's much more of them than there usually are, he murmured. The fear in the traveler's chest began to give way to panic. We're close enough to the lake, he stammered as he began to speak more quickly. And cats don't like water. Is there any way that we can still get to the city? Lower your voice, the man whispered. The boat is gone. They already made the last trip to the city. We'll be fine as long as we're quiet. You don't understand, the traveler continued, backing away from the window. We don't have much time before they wake up. The man froze. Before what wakes up? Both of their eyes rested on the traveler's pack. Gingerly, the traveler set it on the floor and opened its neck. There, nestled among the shirts, were three small kittens, fast asleep. The man backed away, his eyes widening. You fool, he hissed. Those are flickers. I didn't know, he said weakly. I thought they were abandoned. My little girl loves kittens. The man glanced hurriedly out the window at the pack of the cats that had gathered, lighting the edge of the lake with their glow. He pursed his lips. We need to go, he finally agreed. There are too many of them. The safe house was built to hide from the flickers, but with how many of them are out there, they'll find a way to get in, and they'll eventually smell us. I'm willing to bet they won't stop until they get their little ones back. So what do we do? The traveler asked. We go to the water, he responded, pointing to the lake. They can't swim in deep water. About 50 feet out there is a sandbar where we can wait out the night. If we leave the kittens here in the pack, they should take them and go. But what about my pack? I don't care about the pack, the man snapped, and you shouldn't either. You should care more about your own neck. If you want to see that little girl of yours again, you'll listen to me. The traveler went quiet. Look, he continued, his voice softening, we get one shot. I'm going to open the door, and then you and I are going to run like mad. Don't stop for anything, no matter what the flickers do. You got that? He nodded. The man rested his hand against the bolts, slowly sliding them out of place. All right then, on the count of 3. 1, 2. A faint mewling noise came from the pack behind them, followed by a flash of light. The kittens were awake. 3, he yelled, flinging open the door. Out of the corner of the traveler's eye, he could see the group of glowing flickers pause as they turned to see the two men dash out from the shelter of the trees, and then suddenly it went dark. We're not going to make it, the man yelled between breaths as they reached the shore. I'm going to try to buy us some time. Whatever you do, don't stop. The man whirled around, taking a knife that he had at his waist. Here, kitty, kitty. Obeying the man's instructions, the traveler ran, ignoring the screeches and screams of pain as lights flashed behind him. He didn't hesitate as he sloshed through the water until it became deep enough to swim. With pure adrenaline coursing through his veins, it wasn't long until his feet caught hold of the sandbar. It was only then that he turned around. In the flickering light, he could see the other man, standing knee-deep in the water, blood running down his arms and face from thousands of scratches. Flashes of light flared in and out as the horde of cats pulsated towards him, each flicker only staying visible for a few seconds before disappearing again into the shadows of the night. As he fought, the man slowly moved deeper and deeper into the water. The deeper he got, the more hesitant the flickers became as they paused at the shoreline, until finally the man threw his knife and then dived into the water, furiously swimming for his life. With only a moment's hesitation, the traveler swam out, helping the other man onto the sandbar, where they both collapsed exhausted into the cool sand. On the opposite end of the water, the flickers hissed and paced the edge. Once they realized that their prey was out of reach, their light flared until it was nearly blinding. Then, all at once, the lights went out, and it was once again quiet. Are they gone? The traveler asked in a hushed whisper. No, the man said between ragged breaths. They're still there. They're just waiting. What do we do now? Now, he replied, laying back down in the sand, we wait until a boat comes in the morning and pray that they don't try to swim. The traveler cast his eyes back toward the shore, but in the dancing shadows, he couldn't make out anything other than the trees and the faint moonlight. Somehow, he knew they were there, watching and waiting. He sighed. It was going to be a long night.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, forget velociraptors. Cats can hurt you. And if video games taught me anything, it's you always follow the old man who says, hurry, we don't have much time. That was breakneck pacing. That was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Jacob Taylor.
Okay, so I will read one poem I have been working on. It's titled Daddy Dearest. He reached his nadir, evicted from my mother's home. He called me once a week, a novice at the art of conversation. He asked the same 3 questions. I gave rehearsed replies. Copy, paste, paste. He can't replace 19 years of neglect with 5 fake minutes of role play. Each Sunday night, I wish we'd fight instead. Then it stops. He's replaced me, hit restart. He apotheosized and I forgotten again. New wife, new life, new heirs to raise. Get it right this time.
Thank you, Jacob. Nice slant rhymes like copy and paste. This can't replace. I was in that moment. That was beautiful. Thank you. Okay, that brings us almost to the end of our phenomenal February Helicon West. Are there any burning desires? Anyone who's like, oh, I could read. Yes, I see a hand down there. Lisa Duskin Goad, I believe. I'm asking you to unmute.
Duskin Gady.
Thank you.
I'll read a quick poem. Let me go find it here. This was after my husband's death. It's called, well, there's no title. I ironed your handkerchiefs today. They needed it, you see. Needed the hot crease, the neat fold, to be placed in the top drawer of your dresser, even though one won't be pocketed anymore in the right-hand side of your trousers, even though hot soup won't give you the sniffles or a sad movie make you cry, even though it doesn't matter, who would know if your handkerchiefs were left wadded up in the laundry? I ironed your handkerchiefs today because I was your wife and this was my self-appointed duty as your companion. No tears or sniffles appeared on your face in those last few days, only on mine.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
Thank you. I love the meditations on just the little things, right? And how big like they actually are. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think someone else chatted me and requested to read. Michael Berry. Are you in the room? Did you have a poem you wanted to share with us?
Do you want to say you have one?
I
Or two?
have three. They're about 1 minute poems.
Perfect. Nope, we've got 4 minutes. You take them.
Okay, this is the Parkinson face. It's December and I'm sweating. Should have left the coat behind. The feminine swivel is back with the warm wind, a gesture used to attract a mate or nail a rejection. I see Parkinson walking toward me, crossing Broadway at 2nd West. Tall, skinny, ugly, and hateful. In active dream, I try to kill him, at least break his nose. He kicks me in the face and walks away. Waking from dream into dream, broad hips swing under a striped sweater. 2 women exit the gun shop in front of me. Now, I'm like walking behind 3 sets of swivels. It's like a movie. A short man with Parkinson's face enters Ken Sanders. I follow. Parkinson's face on book covers. A woman with Parkinson's face. Everyone with his face. At the laundromat, you've got your triple loaders and your giant loaders, kids pushing the empty carts around, lots of Spanish spoken over the folding tables. Some people with no car, some with no home. Everyone has clothing. 10 quarters for a washer. A guy with a gray ponytail, an earring and tattoos talks to a large baby-faced man. They look like movie hitmen. I skulk by. Gray ponytail says, and then he took a knife out of his pocket and stabbed him in the temple. Smell of detergent, dryers home. I fold my clothes and then drive home. Okay, Thanksgiving Day. Walking 2nd South's empty sidewalks. Everyone home making dinner or watching football. A gray bone, cold day. Someone walking toward me about a block away. The only other person anywhere. We approach and I recognize him. It's the guy from the laundromat. The stabbed him in the temple guy. Hey, I say, how you doing? How you doing? He murmurs. We almost keep walking, but I stop him with, how's that guy? What guy? The guy with the got stabbed in the temple. Oh, that guy. We observe each other. Then he says, not too good. You mean he's dead? No answer. But I have one more question. Why did the other guy stab him? I don't know. He could ask a question or two, like you do, but maybe he wasn't totally prepared for the answer. He might have been the kind of guy that would ask that one question too many. His eyes held mine too long. Well, I'll see you around, I said. At the corner, I looked back. He's gone.
And people are telling you.
Yes, we're all doing the the silent clapping at you. Thank you, Michael. Those are beautiful. Just such specific, heart-wrenching moments. I especially was struck by the line, I, tried to kill him or at least break his nose. Like, oh, just the angst and the helplessness in just that little line, just that little moment. That was fantastic. Yeah, come back and read for us again. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for being here and holding this space. Let's just give like one more round of jazz hands for our readers, our open micers, for Amber and Natalie, and for you for coming and listening, and all of us. Yay! I will get this up on YouTube ASAP. You can find Helicon West's YouTube link at the bottom of the emails. I think it's youtube.com/Helicon West. We'll get you there sooner or later. Our next Helicon will be on March 25th, Thursday, March 25th, 7 p.m. Same place, same Zoom link. And we will have Shane Griffiths reading for us. Shane Griffiths lives in Ogden, Utah, where she teaches creative writing at Weber State University. She has work in the Georgia Review, Prairie Schooner, Cincinnati Review, American Short Fiction, and Booth, among many other publications. She is the author of the novels Borrowed Horses and Scrapple, and the short fiction chapbook The Heart Keeps Faulty Time. Currently, she reads fiction as part of the editorial teams at Barrel House and American Short Fiction. So make sure you come back in about 4 weeks' time. Beautiful turnout tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. And I wish you all a good night.
Good job, Britt. Way to go.
Good to see you, everybody.
Good to see you, Star.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.